relatively normal, and for this couple happened to be specially favorable. Hence, the result of this sacred process, that is to say, this same, according to them, son of theirs, who was later called Makari Kronbergzion, already received in his presence from the beginning of his arising and during his early existence almost the same data for the being of a future responsible being as every Keschat-Martnian three-brained being should possess at his arising, anywhere on any other planet of our great megalocosmos. And as a desire happened to arise in his producers, or as it is said there, in his parents, to prepare their result to become a responsible being with a scientific career, and as they also happened to find successful guides for him, then when this result of theirs became a responsible being, he became a very good scientist, of course very good for the planet Earth. He soon became worthy, on account of his scientific merits, even to become a full member of the learned society Achaldan. During the process of his responsible existence in the scientific field, he once more clearly saw the real value of his own significance and sincerely realized his nullity. From then on, he began with sore grief to meditate seriously on these realizations of his, and the result of his meditations was just this: that in every part of his entire presence, the hope gradually began to arise, and ultimately even the conviction became definitely fixed that conscious labors and intentional sufferings might transform him from a nothing into a something. And then he began to labor consciously with a complete mercilessness towards his denying part, and to create intentionally disturbing conditions for this denying part of his. Moreover, he began to actualize these conscious labors of his and intentionally created conditions of his exclusively only in the manifestations and perceptions to the sphere of those duties of a responsible being which he had taken upon himself, that is to say, in the matter of scientific investigations. It was just during that period of his existence that he understood certain cosmic truths. And in consequence of the fact that data for the engendering of the being impulse called love of kind were still crystallized in him, as in most of the three-brained beings of that period, then in order that other beings of his planet around him, similar to him, should also know about these truths, which he had learned, he created out of marble a boule marchando, under the title of The Affirming and Denying Influences on Man. A boule marchando on the continent Atlantis was what the contemporary beings there have replaced by what they call books. An exact copy of the mentioned boule marchando, made from the tusks of what are called cirniano, I happened to see personally later, namely at my 6th descent there, and to decipher it rather in detail. As the information I learned concerning the question, in what way the said copy of the boule marchando incised with his own hand by Makari Kronbergzion, and which I happened to decipher during my last sojourn on your planet, remained intact and reached to the contemporary epoch, will be very instructive and interesting to you. I will briefly tell you about it. When the original of that boule marchando was created and sincerely admired and approved by the other learned members of the Society Achaldan, it was placed in the middle of the central what is called cathedral of the beings belonging to that society. In consequence of the fact that the contents of the boule marchando then began to interest a greater and greater number of beings of that period, then the leaders of the mentioned society decided to make several copies of it in order to place them in the same way in all the branches of the church, in other cities of that same continent Atlantis, as well as in other continents, 7 very exact copies were made of it, just for this purpose, from the said tusks of the Cirniano. One of these mentioned copies, as my what is called psychonalian investigations cleared up for me, was then assigned to that branch of the church, which was situated on the small continent then existing named Sindraga, which lay not far from the still existing continent Africa. During the second Transalpalnian perturbation to that ill-fated planet, this small continent, Sindraga, also, just like the continent Atlantis, entered with all that was on it within the planet. And as regards the continent Grabonsi, or as it is now called Africa, you must notice that also this continent did not enter wholly within the planet, yet nevertheless the same happened to it as happened to the other existing continents. As for instance to the continent Asia, namely certain parts of it entered within, and in their place from beneath the water others arose, which having become joined to its remaining parts, became formed as it is now at the present time. When, as it seems, the said copy was brought to the continent Grabonsi, in order from there to send it further, then just at that time, that second great catastrophe befell to this ill-fated planet, and owing to that fact, that part of the surface of the continent Grabonsi on which this copy was found happened to remain intact, this copy did not enter within the planet. After this terrifying event, this production of the pending St. Makari Kronbergsion lay for a long time beneath the ruins and was gradually covered with kashiman. And only after about 30 centuries, when the three-brained beings who have taken your fancy again multiplied and their process of reciprocal destruction proceeded near this place between the communities of that time named Filnuanzi and Plitazurali, the beings belonging to the community Filnuanzi, when digging holes to obtain drinking water for themselves and their camels, came across this copy and dug it out. And when, soon after that, the beings belonging to both of the mentioned communities concluded among themselves, as it has already become usual there, what they call a friendly peace, and began to divide everything acquired during this process of theirs by various means which have also already become usual there, and which they express as conquest, pillage, commandeering, indemnities, and so on, then this discovery also, which according to the understanding of the beings of the earth of that period was valued only as rare material, was divided into halves, and the beings of each separate community took for themselves one half of the said great creation. One of the halves of this copy, passing for various reasons from one group to another, finally fell, after 7 centuries, into the hands of what are called the Egyptian high priests. That strange and peculiar combination of several tusks, already incomprehensible to them, became a sacred relic to them. And in this character it existed there until the period when that Persian king, about whom I once already told you, went there with his hordes, and made, as is said there, a clean sweep of that same unfortunate Egypt. Further, that same half of the copy of the Bulmarshano happened to get this time to the continent of Asia, and again passing from hand to hand, passed in the middle of my 6th descent there by inheritance from his